You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
If you love chilling mysteries, unsolved cases, and a touch of mom-style humor, Moms and Mysteries is the podcast you've been searching for. Hey guys, I'm Mandy.
And I'm Melissa. Join us every Tuesday for Moms and Mysteries, your gateway to gripping, well-researched true crime stories. Each week, we deep dive into a variety of mind-boggling cases as we shed light on everything from heists to whodunits. We're your go-to podcast for mysteries with a motherly touch. Subscribe now to Moms and Mysteries wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. The question of the day is there a right way to garden? And arguably, you know that us at the Backyard Gardens podcast would absolutely say, yes, there is a right way to garden, but it is always your choice on how you garden. That is the important part. So this is another replay, and this is our final replay before we come back, and we hope that you enjoy it. Again, all of these replays were voted by you, by your listen, so thank you so much for all of your listening throughout the year. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by becoming a patron, a subscriber, Apple subscriber, or you can also buy some seeds from us. So our discount code that goes until February 15th is YBBBB, and it'll give you a discount. You can also, if you order $35 more, you'll get free shipping. We have all kinds of seeds for you. So you definitely want to check that out. Hope to get your gardens going in the right direction because it is seed starting time. So it is that time of year, and we are excited to come back to you very soon. Check us out on YouTube. We've got some content going up on there as well. We have some other episodes that did not air on the podcast that are only available on YouTube. So come check those out. And I hope you guys are having a fantastic day and a good break, and we will see you soon. So enjoy today's episode. And don't forget, get the Planter app and use the link below to get yourself a discount on the Planter app, available on the Google and Apple Play Store.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
All right, Batavia, this is the moment. We're coming to the pulpit right now. And I'm going to confess my sin. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Always.
Back in the day, early on in this show, I think both of us are guilty of saying, just dig a hole and stick a seed in it and it'll grow. It's really that easy. But as we get into this episode, or into this world of Backyard Gardens podcast, and almost 300 episodes later, I know, shocking, right? That we can actually, I've come to the conclusion, and I think you have as well, as the more we talk about it, we realize it's really not all that easy, is it?
No. And I believe that I don't do this often, but maybe I do.
This is a great way to start.
Yeah. I don't want to own this idea of we've been, guilty of saying this. I kind of feel like I've been on the, no, I don't think it's that easy.
Or maybe it was me.
I don't know if that's true, but I feel like that's the hill I'm going to die on here.
So I'm going to go in defense mode for a second. Another great way to start a show. Mm-hmm. It probably was not you as much. Now, I will say it can be that easy at first, but it's everything that comes afterwards. Identifying certain things and timings and all that stuff, and then the ups and downs and whatnot. So, this is going to be what I imagine. Now, this could very well change throughout the episode, so just hold on to your britches. This is going to be about like just that process. You know what I mean? So
it's a good way to kind of capture the moment, because I can't go back to 2008 and say, did I think it was like, I'm going to put myself back there and it was easy or not. But I feel like, if I go back in the Wayback Machine, I don't feel like I thought gardening could be hard until recent years. And there's a direct correlation with how I've changed as a gardener, how my garden has changed. I think it's connected to it. I feel like not easy as in I was like, sitting in the backyard on a crate, eating a bunch of cucumbers, the next day after I planted the plant. No, not that. But it never occurred to me as this is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, well, you know what? Let's talk about our first gardens. How's that? Let's just dive right into it. I remember in my first garden, it was pretty easy. There wasn't a whole lot of issues, but also I wasn't emotionally attached to my garden. And so if I had an issue, it wasn't a big deal. You know what I mean?
Come on, somebody. So what I may not have said in my preamble was like, how many things died and I just kept on moving, I wasn't doing an analysis on it. I was, let the thing sit there dead or pulled it and was like, I'm buying the cucumber from the store anyway, I can't say for certain, but I feel like that was the vibe then.
Yeah.
It was just a thing that I did, and who knows. Remember, I keep on going back to sometimes my garden didn't go in until June or July. And some things may grow and then they may not. That was still back in the time where I was just like, no, it's okay that the okra pods are 3 or 4 inches long. That's perfectly fine. Then realizing they tasted like wood. And again, I shrugged and kept on moving. It wasn't like I came onto a podcast and talked about it. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, it wasn't. You just did it on your own and it was what it was, and things happen. And look, I know there's somebody out there right now listening and you're in this phase right now, but just work with us here. Just hang in there, because we're going to go through the phases of the garden, for us at least, and how these things started to change. I always tried to do some kind of spring planting, but never really a fall planting of anything. I just kind of let things die out or whatever. And like I said, I wasn't emotionally attached, so it wasn't a big deal. There was, if I failed, it was like, I failed. There was nobody watching me. I didn't tell anybody about it. Now, I did work at a job at the time. I was working for the government, and there was about 5 other people in there that were gardeners. And we were all new gardeners at the same time, except for one guy. He was this old bastard, and he would come in there, and he would come in there, and we would all be struggling with our squash plants because we had to deal with the squash vine borer, and he would walk in with his shirt filled up with squash every day and just drop them on the counter because he's like, I can't eat this stuff. So he obviously had something that he knew about, but otherwise we were all trying to learn together, and we were reading stuff, and I was always the one of the group that kind of would like bring the information forward, and then we would all just decide like, screw it, we're not going to work with it anymore. You know what I mean? So there was never like a big deal, but as the years progressed, the gardens grew, and then came complications.
Yeah, there are layers to that. So I would probably do like maybe 1 post a year. So after I started gardening, shortly thereafter, Facebook was a thing, right? And so I'd probably do 1 post a summer, sharing something that I pulled out of my garden, like, the arm length long zucchini. I didn't even know any better then to know that that's not the tastiest, and that was it. Right. It wasn't even anything that I was like kind of, parading around, not to say that I wasn't proud of what I was doing then, but again, it's just one of the things of many that I posted and shared. Definitely not with the concentration that I have now, clearly. And I'm trying to figure out, like, maybe I saw some other people like with some things online. The community was pretty small for me at that point. I probably got the most feedback from like family. You know, have I ever told you the first time that collard greens were ever planted? In this moment, I had a therapy session with one of my colleagues like an hour ago. So I'm still in that mode. The first collard greens that were ever planted in my garden were planted by my grandfather.
Nice.
It never occurred to me until this moment that may be a part of the connection and my affinity for them. Look at that. Look at there. Mm-hmm.
So it's funny. I just, we had planned this episode a while back and just kind of kept it in the wings, but I have a video that's either coming out or have come out, one of the two, where I was talking about why I'm not expanding my garden and like hammering in these issues. And the part of like my garden growing exponentially is why, because it brought on other issues as I got more diverse with my plantings and my varieties and all that stuff. Different things have happened. And then over the years, getting more and more into what I would like to call year-round gardening, which is really like 10-month gardening, that has brought on issues as well. And it brings on a set of complications. So like with you, for instance, like, do you remember when things started getting kind of complicated for you? And if you say this year, I'm going to throw up in my shoe.
Well, no, I'm claiming all of the goodness and all of the ease for this year. I don't know if I could place the year. I think it definitely was associated with expansion, because I was trying, things that I hadn't done before. So the years that I gardened just along the fence line, kind of in ground, no beds or anything, I don't remember ever pointing to, oh, shoot, there's a problem. Right? I think problems probably started to present themselves. Like things became a little bit more difficult when I moved to like the raised beds on my concrete patio. I don't think because they're raised beds on my concrete patio, but it was done based on my desire to grow different things. So now I'm introducing a plant that I hadn't grown, the mistake of planting mint in a raised bed, and not realizing, the impact of the way that mint is like a wild thing. So I can't point my finger to a particular issue or a particular year where it became problematic. But I definitely think as I transition away from where I've been gardening for many, many years to gardening in a different place, is when things is like, oh, let me try something different because this thing isn't working right now.
It's breaking
down. Those conditions they are wholly different, and you should expect there to be some different impact on what you're growing, right? The in-ground spaces I grew in, the earth, how far does it go down, young Ben? You always say this, how much?
The mantle, or not the mantle, the crust, 3 miles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's plenty of space versus the 10 inches that I have on my concrete.
Yeah, plenty of space.
Yeah.
Daikon radishes, here we come, baby. Yeah, for me, it was, I'm trying to think. So I was gardening in zone 6, and then I moved to zone 8, and I had 1 garden bed. And then the year that I went from 1 to 4 garden beds, I started to see that there was a real challenge occurring. And then the next year when I and I've said this 1,000 times, but I'll say it again in case there's somebody new. We had a really bad hurricane, knocked out a bunch of trees. So I created the wild garden. And then that was the year in which I saw exactly the power of Mother Nature and what can happen. And the plants were doing great, but the weeds were doing even better. We'd have tomatoes that were 4 feet high and weeds that were 3 feet, 8 inches high. And you couldn't stay on top of it. And that was really an eye opener for me. So that was like, it took me a while to get to the point to where I was like, oh, this really isn't as easy as I thought, and it's like I said in that video too, it was like, whenever you start a new garden bed, issues will arise. At some point, for whatever reason. You could have a pest, you could have a disease, you could have weeds, you could have, too much to handle, whatever. And so as those issues arise and you see them, you got to stay on top of them. So that was the weeds that came that year were just unprecedented. I had no clue that something like that was possible to just come that fast and that hard and that long. And there was nothing you could do about it whatsoever. We would go out there and we would spend hours weeding it, and then you come back a week later and they're just right back. And then we do it, but then you have to wait for them. So then they come back and we do it again and again and again, and it kind of led us to the situation we're in now. But that was the beginning. And then once I started really doing more intensive planting, then I started realizing that there's soil issues to contend with that are a real issue. And that's the stuff that you can't see it. And that's super freaky to me. Same with diseases too.
I'm trying to think, I'm thinking about the issues. And when you asked, when did you start to have problems in your garden? So now my mind is trying to plot different types of problems and when I experienced those. And, the saying of, you basically let the garden run wild now comes from my grandmother. She probably didn't create it, or maybe she did.
We'll give it to her.
Yeah. And so there definitely was a point, probably around August, I guess, that, the weeds were just taking over, and I was welcoming letting it run wild, So I've never looked at weeds as oh, yeah, I have to show you a picture of pre-planting my garden. It was July, very beginning of end of June, very beginning of July, and the weeds that were growing up in the cracks of my concrete patio. The raised bed that I had there was full of weeds. So I'll think about all of spring and the beginning of summer, all of the rain, and it was terrible. The 5-foot fence between my neighbor and I, the weeds that were along the fence where I would grow on were higher than the fence. It was a mess. And so it took me days to clear that space, which was very satisfying after I did it. So I say that definitely occurred, but throughout the season, I didn't really care that much about weeds, and they didn't present that big of a problem. I wasn't doing anything to suppress them at all. But I look back and say, at what point did I start to experience what I understood to be disease?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer, but I pause to think about that, because I feel when it comes to problems that gardeners have, I'm working through the gumbo of them now. But back then, it was one issue you had with your garden, versus the many. Yeah. And maybe again, I'm just with what's more current, what I can actually look back on a video or a camera or whatever have you. Maybe I'm more focused on that, on suppressing those memories from way back then.
It's funny you say that, because it was actually earlier than that, when my first bout with powdery mildew. That was when, and that was years, maybe my second year of gardening. I remember I had a pretty bad battle with it. And I remember reading about it and basically learning that there's almost nothing you can do for it. So I do remember that being an issue, because I remember I would get up for work, and every morning I would get up for work, I'd walk around the garden, I'd water if I had to, and then I would treat it with what I would consider treating, which was cow's milk and something else mixed in water. And then apparently the proteins would attack the powdery mildew when the sun hit it. So that was kind of my method that I would do. And so I was doing this and it smelled putrid in the middle of summer. It was horrible, but it was one of those things where you realize there's nothing I can do about this, And so then you fast forward to the weeds and stuff like that. But even then, now as an experienced gardener, these things still crop up, and it's shocking when you see it, when your tomatoes wilt or your cucumbers don't produce, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And you try to figure it out. You look it up, you research it, you ask people, and it's there's no rhyme or reason for it. And so it's you just kind of have to take a stab at the dark and be well, I got fusarium wilt, or cucumber mosaic virus, or something crazy,
I think that I probably have pictures somewhere on the internet with plants that are next to me or behind me that are peppered and powdery mildew, and I just didn't even know any better. It's look at my garden.
Look at how pretty they are. Everything's turning white. Yeah, and so then it's like, you know, and then you get a pest. And luckily pests are not as difficult to treat. I mean, you can find a remedy for most pests. You know what I mean? It's the diligence. Yeah. And then you start, so when these things come up, then it becomes a battle of like wit and what I like to call intestinal fortitude, where you're just like, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to keep attacking it and I'm going to stay on top of it. And you're checking it every day and you're like, is there any more damage? Oh no, there's more. The Japanese beetles are back, boy. You know, and you're just constantly trying to treat it and handle it. And it's a daunting task at times, I would say.
I'm trying to balance, because we're more experienced and because we have seen many more issues in our gardens. Like, are you looking for trouble?
Yeah.
You know? So, like, did you, again, 10 years ago, did you kind of shrug at some issue and kept it moving, versus now it's like you got your Inspector Gadget hat on and, you know, like, are we complicating our experience more because we're experienced?
No. I'm gonna go on a limb and say no. I think you're more vigilant because you know what can happen, and you and I and a lot of our audience knows that you gotta get on these things early, and you gotta find them. And I mean, we're coming up into the season. It was like the other day, I was out in the greenhouse, and I was sitting in the greenhouse, as a matter of fact, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get some mustard. So I harvested some mustard and it was covered in aphids. I mean, you know, just the underside of the leaves. I mean, it looked like it was a straight aphid orgy going on in there. So I was thinking about it and I was like, well, and it was funny that we're going to talk about this, because I looked at it and my initial reaction was like, oh my God, this is so bad. Like, I've never seen aphids this bad. And so I took my thumb and I killed every single one of them. I mean, it was genocide. It was crazy. And then I came back like a week later and there's still no aphids. Now that's my experience that's kicked in, that knows like, hey, you just got to kill them and then you have to keep an eye on them, but you know how to handle aphids. And I mean, you know that I don't really worry over aphids that bad because and I've learned how to handle them. But when you see them, it's shocking in the amount of numbers that they can be on a plant. It's like, it's unreal how many you can get. But when you first see it that first time, it's so daunting. And then you go down the rabbit hole of like trying to learn about it. And then you figure out like, hey, I can't just treat it once. I got to treat it during its life cycle. So I get the eggs, and then you come back and, you know, you're learning all of this at the same time. When not to mention, you've got this other plant over here with the squash vine borer in it. You've got this other one with powdery mildew. And so there comes a point where you're trying to manage all of this stuff at once, and it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. I hate aphids with everything I have. Even, I just hate it. And I have been thinking about adopting the whole, once they come, I'm pulling the plant, like I'm done.
Really?
With it. Yeah, like that's my method of treatment. So as a quick update, we are 1 month in of starting some brassicas from seed, and some look really, really good. By the time this airs, we will know if this gal here was successful, right? By the time this airs, we'll be close to trying to figure out what the weather is going to be like outside. But I bring that up and I'm kind of like, you know, the Tuscan kale looks the best so far, which is like I'm chasing your pictures of your Tuscan kale from last month. And I'm just like, you know, I'm going to be flexible here, man. If this is a thing that it feels like I can start from seed, I'm going to get it out there. But I know like the aphids love.
Yeah.
It feels like all kinds of kale plants. But I'm just like, you know, just grow more of it and then be done with the plant when you're done with the plant. I mean, I think that the way that you manage things like pests sometimes shifts year over year, depending on how important that crop is. And I bet your experience with aphids is different now than it was in the fall, and maybe different than it was in the spring. In the summer. I think that obviously some pests have a time frame that they run in, and those same plants, when you grow them in a different time frame, like I thought once the weather is cooler, you have less pest pressure as a general statement. And so I am kind of surprised to hear that, you have aphids now, but I'm wondering if those are just really older plants.
In the greenhouse. Oh,
there it is. Yeah.
In the greenhouse.
Yeah, a lot more humid. There's a lot warmer.
Yeah, it's a lot warmer in there.
Okay.
So yeah, and the thing is too is everything's densely packed in there. So as we go through, I have to think to myself like, this aphid can easily jump to another plant, and so then it's like, all right, I got to stay on top of that. And actually, I'm not even going to say it out loud about the pests and my experience with them this year, but you can put 2 and 2 together. I will not put it out into the world because I am not going to jinx myself. And that is the end of that story. Thank you. But no, and I think too, it was like, if we go back a little bit, we talk about like the passion and the emotion involved in the garden. When you started, you're like, hey, great, I'm starting a garden. But then as you get more into it and you start learning more, and I think once you get involved more with your food, because gardening is, if you look at it, like everybody eats. So having your garden is a very intimate process into your lifestyle and your family and your nutrition and well-being. And I think once you start learning that and you get out of like, hey, I'm going to have a fresh salad, or, you start really getting into like the preserving and then all the recipes that you're going to do with all of your extras. Cause I feel like a lot of people start a garden, and at least a lot of people I know, and they just grow in the way they eat more and more and more, because there's so much that can come off of one tomato plant. You know what I mean? So you've got to find all these different ways. Now, like my stepdad, he'll eat the hell out of a tomato sandwich every day until the day he dies. Go ahead.
Good for him. He's my kind of guy.
Yeah.
No, I was as you were speaking, I was thinking about the continued connection to, social media and the internet. And if I go back again to 2008, the one picture or 2 pictures I'd share or post I'd make on Facebook. And while I know that there are a bunch of gardeners that have like long-standing YouTube channels, for example, and have been out there sharing their garden experience going back then, and I don't know if Instagram even existed then, but I think our perception of hard absolutely is influenced by kind of what we're seeing in everyone else's gardens. And I was pulling up a comment. I shared a video last summer. It was titled "My Garden Mistake plus My Garden Journey." Because I always want to tell that story. So the person writes, "I really appreciate you sharing your wins in all capital letters and your losses. It's so helpful to me, to someone like me who has grown herbs for a long time, but I'm pretty new to vegetables." And so the person goes on to talk about, some of the battles they have, and phrased it as a lot of battles, but they're encouraged to continue to, garden based on videos like me. So this isn't really about me, but it's this idea of, we oftentimes see the pretty. We've talked about this over and over, and it's still relevant, right? We oftentimes see the pretty. It's not like, when your kids take a picture at school, you're not sending to family and friends the one where, their eyes were closed. Like, you're going to share the thing that, you feel like best represents them. And that's the same thing with our garden. And whether or not you and I are looking at our garden saying that, oh, this is a problem is one thing, or I'm going through some difficulty, or this is hard is one thing, versus what we share and kind of when we look at other people's gardens and think, well, how is it that they have 80 eggplant? How in the world could they pull this off? I get the question of, how can I grow, large collard green leaves? And I'm like, shoot, I still don't know how I do it.
Yeah, you just do it.
Yeah. And so, but then when someone doesn't grow, leaves that are the size of your head, it's like, well, this is hard because my leaves are only the size of your hand, which I'm going to eat them all, Yeah. So there is that.
You're making me uncomfortable.
That's fine. Perception versus reality is where I'm trying to get to.
Well, and I didn't anticipate this going in this direction, but I'm going to say it. That's why social media is so damn toxic. And I've seen some people's stuff and it'll look completely amazing. And I'm literally sitting there, I'm like, turn the camera around. Let's see what's behind you. Like, it ain't all good. You know what I mean? Like, there's hardly a garden out there that just doesn't have an issue. And that's why on this show and on both of our YouTube channels, Sandy Bottom Homestead and Be Better Gardens, we try to... we really try to highlight the issues as they arise too. It can't all be good, because one thing that we know is when you look at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name whatever platform, you're seeing a curated process. You're seeing exactly what people want you to see, and that's fine. But the problem I have with it is, as you are learning, and let's face it, as a garden, a company that is focused on gardening, you and I both know that you are always learning how to garden all the time. There is nothing that you have figured out just 100% you're good no matter what. You don't ever worry about it. It's just good, and we're always learning. And so it's in our nature to look at these things and say, like, hey, I don't have that. Why are my collard greens not so big? And I mean, look, the answer is simple. There's 3 reasons. 1, you have a different variety. 2, you're not feeding it enough. Or 3, I don't know, pick one. I mean, it could be watering, sun. There's so many different reasons why you couldn't have these large leaves. You know what I mean? So,
so you started with there are only 3 reasons, and then you're like, there could be any number of reasons, right?
My mind goes faster. My mouth goes faster than my mind sometimes.
Yeah, the list got longer in your head. You're like, I need to put a cap on this. And then there's also a small part of me that, I can be critical and say, like, but why do you need them to be? Are you looking to say that you believe that these will be more nutritious, that you want them to be larger because, and again, it's a little bit of devil's advocate, because you clearly are getting more of the vegetable? Like, that makes sense, of course. But I guess what I'm trying to make sure that, we talk about is because they're smaller, and I'm assuming, like, how can I get them to be that big? Kind of what's implied there is you've grown them and they've not been that big. That could be a wrong assumption, but let's say that that's the case. And you're looking and saying, mine are supposed to be that large. What am I doing wrong? What should I be doing differently?
Right. And I think too, you hit the nail on the head, is what am I doing wrong? We always want to emulate what somebody else is doing when they are super successful. And I mean, let's face it, you're super successful at growing collards.
Yes, she is.
Now look, I grow
me.
the hell out of collards. My leaves aren't that big, and I am happy with what I get, because once I cut them up, it don't matter how big them leaves were. And I mean, it's like I told my wife the other day, it all goes down the same place and comes out the same way. It's gross, but it's true.
Definitely didn't think it was going there. So there are only kind of 2 families that have eaten collards from my garden, now that I think about it. A really good girlfriend of mine, and then my own personal family, right? And so it makes me wonder, obviously when you cook them, it's going to taste, every pot of greens is going to taste different. Like when you prepare them, it's going to be some slight difference based on whatever the cook is doing. But like your greens may taste the way that you want. I always say things, and I try to weave it in every video, because there are people that are experienced with growing collards and they feel like they get tougher. They're not as tasty once they get that large. So I don't even know if the goal should be to grow them that large. And to your point, variety is absolutely king when it comes to that too. You could have a variety that isn't designed to get that large, where I'm growing a variety that is, perhaps, which it isn't something I set out to do. In fact, I probably stumbled upon it, at least one year. But it kind of goes back to, like, if you enjoy zucchini or some type of summer squash more when it's younger, but you're looking and saying, but how do I get it to be that big? you're missing out on the thing that you could be enjoying because you're chasing something that you don't even know how that thing tastes. My point with the whole 2 families, you don't even know how these greens taste, Now, I'm not on their line. They damn good,
Yeah. Well, look, and I mean, truth be told, like, if you cook me a pot of collard greens, I probably wouldn't like your collard greens. I know that that's hearsay, but I don't like that style of collard greens. You know what I mean? Not meaning, like, if you gave me your collard greens from your garden, I wouldn't like them. But I don't like the pot liquor and all that stuff in my collard greens. Does that make sense? I know you're highly offended right now, and I'm very sorry. My heart really does bleed, and I kind of regret saying it out loud, but there it is.
I am offended. And I'm not one of those folks like, you're going to love what I cook, right? But clearly I am about collards. I'm offended.
That was a low blow. I'm sorry.
And I wish you wouldn't have said it. And I definitely wish you wouldn't have said it in public, because now I'm going to be expected to look at you differently. Right? Like, I can't fake this going forward. Like, this has changed our relationship.
That's okay.
No, that's exactly it. Like, and I basically cook them like one way. I consume my collards almost one way. So, and it's a benefit for me if they get larger, because it's kind of sort of less work. But anyway, that's an example of... I'm trying to change the subject off of collard greens before I get emotional, because I'm still replaying the words that you said.
You're working up there.
So if I look at this and say, is it hard or not? If that person that sent me the message, actually, there's a new message about collard greens. Because again, that's my jam. And it's like, my question is how to grow large greens and how to fertilize them in the winter. You have a great garden. Appreciate the compliment.
Nitrogen.
And I'm just like, well, one, I'm like, the winter? Like, where are you? Because I ain't doing nothing in the winter, clearly. But I could answer nitrogen. This is always so hard for me to give advice on how to make maybe something not hard for you. Again, the idea you're asking for help, right? But I'm going to give you advice on a thing that I barely do.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it's like, it doesn't mean that you can mimic what I barely do and still have success. That's that weird piece that I feel. And that's the reason why I'm just still uber cautious. But a part of what we do, though, is to share, is to elicit questions, is to help, so it's like a double-edged sword for me. And maybe I'm misinterpreting, it'd be nice to hear from some folks that are listening. Maybe I'm misinterpreting kind of the concept of someone's asking a question, like asking you kind of what you do or what would you recommend. And they're doing it because they're trying to solve something. Maybe that's not the spirit they asked the question in.
Yeah. And I think this becomes a personal issue where it's like, stop comparing yourself all the time to other things. And so it's like, if you go back to the bigger is better thing, let's talk about your zucchini for a second. Let's get off collards. I'm done. How many times have you seen a picture posted of a huge, beautiful zucchini? I mean, just stunningly. But your experience, that once you cut that zucchini open, ain't nothing but seeds in it. Because it's gone past. And so what's happened in the process is not only have you let this zucchini go too far, so it's going to be excessively seedy, you've also told the plant itself, like, hey, I'm reproducing right now. I'm done. I don't need to make any more because I have fulfilled my duty to the world and, reproduced. So it's not going to produce as much. So like cucumbers, for instance, cucumbers are famous for that. Once you let one go, the whole plant's done. So you cannot let one go. I want to say that again. You cannot let one go because once you do, it's done and it will die off on you. So
I don't know that to be fact, but if I look back on some of my recent years of zucchinis, it fits, right?
So it's like when you compare yourself to other people and stuff like that, it's like, you don't really know the whole story sometimes, but kind of getting back to where we started, once you grow your zucchini for a couple of years, you'll start harvesting it at different times and you'll know, like, hey, I like it when it's smaller. I like it when it's big. I mean, you might be weird and like your okra when it's super woody and it's like chewing on a stick. I mean, you'll find that out over
It's
time.
like tobacco or something without the buzz of tobacco. I don't know. Beef jerky without the taste of beef. It's like a vegan beef jerky.
Yeah.
Did we just create a product?
No, you didn't, and it gives you terrible gas.
Okay. Yeah, a buddy of mine, I'm not going to tell the idea because I may go with it. And he's like, do you think people are going to pay you for that? And I'm like, yes. Vegan okra jerky. Come
there you
on.
go.
Oh, watch. I promise you, someone's listening and someone's going to take this idea and run with it. I just want to be on the commercial when you're advertising.
You're selling yourself short.
You can have the idea.
I don't know if I'd eat that personally, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried multiple times because I've just not been able to throw it out. You take that first couple of bites, and
I went backpacking one year and I took some okra that I found. I don't know the way it was prepared. It's like prepackaged, like fried okra kind of. You didn't have to cook it or anything. It's kind of like a banana, like bananas that you get, like banana chips, but it's like okra chips. And I was excited. I was like, yeah, boy, I'm going to have me some vegetables out here. Never really had a whole lot of vegetables out there. Man, I was so tired of eating that crap after like 2 days. You couldn't pay me. I didn't even grow. I came home and ripped all my okra plants up. I was over it. So
I did too for okra. And so this is a surefire way so it won't be hard. It won't be hard to garden with okra. Use it as a teething source for babies. I'm trying to tell you, man. How much time do we have? I think I have like 4 or 5 more ideas. That's probably like a choking hazard or something. So maybe not that. You probably need to field test that.
Yeah, you might want to hold off on that. But so, I mean, you know, as you grow and you get deeper into it, you start learning more about it. And well, let me ask you, do you think there's aspects that actually get easier in time with your garden?
Patience?
Yeah.
No, philosophical answer.
No, but that's, you know, man, that's such a good answer. I don't care if it is a Sunday school answer or not. That is the right answer. Patience is something that is key to all of this. I mean, it's like I put my kale plants out a couple days ago and I'm like, all right, are they growing? Are they growing? All right, are they settled? Do I have new leaves yet? And it's like, dude, just back off. You know what I mean? Come back in a week. Holla at your boy in a week. So, anything else that's really gotten easier?
You know, I think centered around this episode, I think the confidence in dealing with problems.
Yeah, that was mine.
You know,
the approach.
Well, why don't you elaborate on it? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's like over the years you handled different issues and you start to get, like for me in aphids, like I've kind of gotten a hang of aphids. I don't know how to prevent them, but I know how to handle them. You know, Japanese beetles is another one. Like I remember the first year I got Japanese beetles, man, it looked like confetti out there on my green bean trellis. It was bad. And I didn't know what to do. So I just let them go. But now I know diligent hand picking really does help with the levels of Japanese beetles, and you can get on top of it, but you've got to be diligent to do it, you know? So those are just some quick examples. And I mean, also like growing certain plants, like you know what to expect from them, like different tomatoes, you know what I mean? Like indeterminate versus determinate, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think when I look at, you know, the confidence, I'm confident that I'll be able to figure this out. And if I don't, it's not the worst.
Yes.
You know, like I think I haven't had like a complete crop failure. You know, like I have, you know, a beds, plural, of a thing and it completely fails. I had a bad tomato year, but I still made a bunch of salsa, you know, so it wasn't a complete crop failure. And so it's probably in every gardener's future. Let's just be realistic. You start adding these years up when you're doing it, it's going to happen. I'm not talking about a single plant dying. Again, complete, you know, crop failure or a complete garden failure. I've seen some things, especially with weather, when it comes to some of these storms, like more rain than anyone could ever, you know, imagine, like completely washing out people's gardens. So I've seen some tragic stories online, on the internet, on the line. And that's not been my experience. So I'm just generally talking about
on the line.
Generally, yeah. You're going to give me the giggles. I'm talking about like, there's no like fire. There's no panic when I'm introduced to a problem in the garden. So I think that just comes with experience. My experience is that confidence has come with experience. And generally I'm a problem solver, I'm a troubleshooter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean I'm not pissy when it happens.
Yeah.
I'm not frustrated. It doesn't mean that repeated problems, year over year, I don't want to strangle a plant. Of course I do sometimes. You hear me, I'm pulling kale plants after the first harvest. Forget cut and come again. I'm running away from the aphids.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lady come over the other day to buy some seedlings from me. And when we were messaging back and forth, she was like, this is my first garden. I'm just really looking to get into it. And I was like, well, if you have any questions, when you come to get your seedlings, be sure to ask. And so as we were talking, I realized, as I was talking to her, I realized I was going way over her head. Because I was trying, I had a few minutes. And, if you buy a seedling or something from me, I want you to be successful. So I'm going to do the best I can, minus giving you all the stuff, but I'll give you the knowledge that I have and point you to the right directions. But the amount of questions that she had, you could tell that this was going to be a tough year. You know what I mean? And she wanted to grow a variety of things, which is really hard place to start because there's so much to learn about each individual plant and the times that they grow and when they grow, when they can be harvested and all that stuff. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. My biggest challenge is getting things to a point where I can get them timed right. I had a whole timeline set up for this this spring, and I mean, here we are. Each day the temperature swing's been 40 degrees. You know what I mean? So that's changed my timeline. But see, my experience has kicked in, and I know that it's okay to do that. Forward looking into the forecast using the tools available, I know that I am able to make this happen in a different way than I had initially planned and how the book tells me to do it. And so that's been a big benefit too, is being able to be flexible with the weather and stuff like that, And I'm here to tell you, I just fertilized my lettuce seedlings today. And at the same time, I looked at the weather and I was like, I really need to harden them off. And so I was considering just go ahead and just leave them outside and let them harden off. But it makes me nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, man. I can't do that because I'm going to be pushing new growth at the same time hardening off. I'm begging for die off, just begging to kill those plants. So I need to wait a couple days and I'll risk it after that. But you want to stay on top of it. But those are things that kind of have made it easier for me in my garden in the process. Excuse me. So
okay,
I'm good. My mouth got dry.
Yeah.
That happens.
So I don't know if it just became an elephant in the room when we were talking about gardening being harder. Clearly the purpose of you gardening, if we go back to those earlier years, I was just gardening to, have some vegetables, a few here and there. As you want to produce more and as you want to manage that production differently, that absolutely adds to the complexity. Ding! The complexity of gardening. And so for me, gardening has become more complex. And in turn, naturally, it's a bit harder than it was back then. I feel like that's a closeout, man. I feel like I just summed it all up for me. Thank you again for this session of therapy.
You're welcome. I'll send you my bill in the mail.
Can you send it to me? Can I pay you in seeds or future vegetables?
Yeah, I'd like some boxcar willy seeds. In the next 3 days. No, because
let me add you to the list of people I owe seeds to. Shout out to the Purple Thumb Gardener. I got you, girl. It may be for 2024, but I got you.
We're on a 3-year process. We know how this works. Put your orders in now, because in 3 years you'll get them.
If you happen to fly to Chicago, I'll meet you at the airport. You have a better chance of that than that's to you, young man.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's focus on eating food when we give the recipe of the day. All right, everybody. That was an abrupt stop, but straight up honesty, I forgot what I was going to say, and the time was right. So I'm going to give you a spring vegetable pot pie. Now, to be honest, the recipe calls it vegan, and I hate more than anything when somebody makes something vegan and they put the word vegan in front of it. So whatever, add chicken to it just out of spite. Okay. And this recipe, we'll post it on the Patreon page if you guys would like to see it. It includes your vegetables, which calls for fennel bulb, leeks or onions, garlic, potatoes, carrots, asparagus, and peas. So it is full of your spring vegetables. The herbs are tarragon, lemon thyme, and chives. And then you're going to need some kind of milk. It clearly says in the recipe almond milk or cashew milk, but you know what? Throw some cow's milk in there just to despite them calling it vegan. Just kidding about that. Use whatever you'd like. Lemon juice, some bouillon, whole grain mustard. I don't know what that is, but salt and pepper, flour, and then butter or olive oil. And so you're going to chop up all your veggies, make them, you generally want to make them about the same size so they cook better. Boil them down for about, blanch to the potatoes and carrots in salted water for 10 minutes until fork tender. And then save a half a cup of the water as you drain it. Dissolve the bouillon in the saved potato water at the same time. And then you're going to saute your leeks or onions, or you know what? Just do both. Live on the edge. With garlic, fennel, and asparagus. And then in a pan that's about 10 inches deep, you are going to hold on. This recipe is weird because you have to go scroll down to see each individual picture. Use an oven-proof 10-inch pan, or after cooking on the stove, transfer to a completed filling to a baking dish. There you go. Add all the veggies and the saute mix, and then put the butter in it in the center. So you're going to push it to the side, put the butter in, add flour as best as you can, add the bouillon and broth milk, and stirring while whisking so that you can get it nice and thick. Add the mustard and let the sauce come to a gentle boil. Turn off the heat. Stew. Add the peas, lemon juice, lemon thyme, tarragon, and chives. And then let the filling cool while you prepare the crust. Use whatever crust you want. I'm not going to get into how to make a crust. And then you put it in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes at... Oh, cool. It doesn't give you a temperature. So pick your temperature. Wow, this place sucks. I may have over-skimmed it. It definitely, I do not see a temperature, but whatever. If it was me, I would do 425 because my oven only has two temperatures, 425 and 450.
What's the consistency we're going for once it's supposed to be done?
Well, you're just baking the top of the crust at the top. So, and it actually tells you how to make a puff pastry, but I'm not going to get into all that. We'll put it on Patreon. You guys can go look at it, whatever. But that way you can use all of your spring vegetables. Now, that being said, I would never grow fennel because in my research, it apparently hates every single plant known to man and is very combative to it. Don't know if that's true or not, but I don't really care for the taste that much, but it does sound good in little small amounts in this.
I have an idea about something we should be talking about as a bonus / Patreon episode. So let's talk about that once we wrap up here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
At this point, there's so many things in my head that I just got to start saying them when they come into my brain.
Well, the season is kicking up at this point too, so people are really starting to think about their gardens, which is a beautiful thing. Super glad to hear that. So,
and just a quick note, I'm a huge fan of pot pies. The creaminess, it's one of my favorite things. And now I think I have a frozen one, which is going to be, any fresh pot pie is going to be better than a frozen one. But hey, this is what I got. And the idea of lumping in a bunch of vegetables that I've grown potentially. Like, that's really, really cool. So, some recipes you got to tweak a bit. Maybe this is one of them.
Yeah, and I'll actually set this recipe to public on Patreon so everybody can go look at it because I don't know what the temperature was, so everybody can go look at it for themselves.
People can comment, right? I can't wait for people to comment saying, look, I turned it to 500. I slow broiled it. Yeah. No, 200 is the way to go.
I love my mom. I love you, Mom. But she will cook it at like 275 for like 15 hours. I definitely do it wrong. I am not a baker. I will tell you that. My wife is the baker, and I tried to make her a cake one time, and it was a hockey puck. We ate it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, are we settling on gardening ain't easy? Gardening is hard? Where
you know
do we
what?
land?
That's a good question. Is it or is it not easy?
I don't know. I think we need people to tell us. I don't know that we should be coming up with that answer.
Well, I mean, in your opinion, though, I think that's not fair. I think we should definitely come up with something.
No, if you just follow my lead a little while longer instead of jumping in there, you'd let me say, why don't you join us over on the Backyard Gardens community on Facebook, and we're going to pose this question right around the time this episode airs.
Well, because I can't remember the name of it, that's why. Yeah, it's our Facebook page. It's growing, and thank you everybody for being a part of it. What's the name of it again?
Damn it. I was fronting right then, like as if I knew it. It's the Backyard Gardens community, Backyard Community. Garden.
I need to take my ass to the. I need to take my ass to the store and get a pack of Post-it notes and put it right here on my screen so I can see it.
Yeah, right.
50 cents would stop all of this.
Backyard Gardens Community Garden. That's a mouthful.
It is.
And we should talk about what's his name? What's the guy's name?
Oh, I don't know.
Leonard's annual review.
Oh.
Clearly, this is something that if he can't prep us in this way,
you know what's sad is you didn't even remember his name. That's how low you are on this totem pole, Leonard.
When's the last time that he actually sent you something of value about the show?
When's the last time he did anything of value?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, there is something about when you do something for free, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. maybe we should, instead of his performance, talk about maybe, a pay for him. Can we pay him in seeds?
Yeah, you'll get your pay in 3 years. All right, everybody. Come check us out at all our usual spots, Patreon, YouTube channels for both Batavia and I, Facebook on the community group that you now know the name of, Amazon list down below to get all of your stuff. Everything's been tried and tested. And until the meantime, just remember one thing. Gardening ain't easy, and we have learned to grow and grew for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.